about to those of us doing MSc Educational Leadership as well?
Right, okay. I don't know. Sorry, it's a simple answer, yes. I'm for the School of Management, hence I know about the detailed processes for the School of Management, but I don't know the detailed processes for other departments in the university. But what you would have, going back a page, similar guidelines that indicate to you, the exact requirements. And I guess what I'd say, though some people in that department might contradict me, it's still sensible to think of it in these two stages. All right, even if there isn't a formal requirement to submit a proposal, even if there isn't that kind of 15% mark for it. All right, and maybe at this stage a bit of history. I think it was me that introduced this idea of the proposal a very long time ago. Because what we had, and for full-time students, not for distance learning, all right? So we're talking about a long time ago. And the reason for doing that is my experience the first couple of years of being at Leicester was we had some students who got to that stage of submitting a dissertation, and we thought, or I thought, that's not a dissertation. Why did you do that? Okay? So to stop that, we said, well, you give us an idea up front of what you want to do. And then we can say, yep, we think that works. So it works in the sense of it's what we require, but also it works in the sense we think you can do it in the timescale available. So even though, as I say, it may not be a formal requirement, it still might be very useful for you to think through, make some notes on what I'm planning to do. And again, bounce that off a tutor. So you don't choose something that's, essentially a PhD project. It's going to take you 3 years or 5 years. It's something that's doable within the timescale available. And also, as I say, fits in with the requirements, of the department.
Another question. It therefore means that the blackboard that you are speaking about will be different from the blackboard that we have to interact with?
Yes, it will. Well, the blackboard's the same, but the way it's set up will be a bit different, yeah, agreed. So that's something I forgot to ask, apologies. So how many people are not studying a course that's in the School of Management? Is it just the one? No, okay, there are a few of you. All right, so apologies, I do not know the detail of all the processes involved in those departments. But if you want to, maybe when we finish, throw some questions at me, then I'll try and answer in terms of at least the kind of notion of what's required for a dissertation and so on. Yeah? Okay, another question. Okay, thank you. Okay, so firstly, a little bit about the proposal. The most important bit, it seems to me, the part in the middle that tells us what you're planning to do. But also, a formal requirement from the university now in terms of what's known as an ethics form. And that's asking you about what kind of research you actually plan to undertake. And at one level, the departments, and maybe the university, but very unlikely, needs to approve your kind of research. And so even though it may seem a bit tedious, when you get to this stage, you've got to tick all the boxes and say yes or no. That's something that's been imposed, probably not just on the University of Leicester, but on all universities. On most occasions for you, it will be straightforward. You may be talking to people, you may be sending out some questionnaires, and hence you need to tick yes to some of the boxes. But you know, that research is absolutely fine, and there won't be any problem in getting approval. I think part of the reason why this was introduced at Leicester and other universities is because some people in those universities are engaged in kind of medical research. Well, obviously they're dealing with individuals, with people, but in a very different way to the way that we would be conducting research. So even though it's a formal requirement, I don't think it's anything you need to worry about. The other thing we ask you to include in this proposal document is the AGC form. So the same sort of thing you get with your assignments. And that's because submission is electronic and also feedback is electronic. Hopefully that makes it a bit quicker, and some of you are probably saying no. But in addition, hopefully it means that at least you can read the tutor's writing without saying, well, I can't read that bit, and corresponding with this again, and that bit's not clear, and so on. So I think as a consequence, particularly at this stage, you probably get more feedback and better feedback as a consequence of that kind of electronic process. There is also a suggested structure in terms of the proposal itself. May not work for everybody, okay? May not work for every single project. But, at least as a starting point, various things that you need to think about, various elements that you need to think through. And probably most projects that you come up with will be applicable to this kind of format in terms of the proposal. And what I think is most crucial in there, and what some people tend to ignore, is previous research. So, you come up with an initial idea. Strikes me the first thing you need to do is to say, well, how do I turn that into academic research questions? The best way of doing that, or seeing if that is doable, is to see what's been written on the topic already. And I'd be very, very, very surprised if nothing has been written on the topic of interest. If there hasn't, then maybe it doesn't really work as a dissertation. If it hasn't, and it does work as a dissertation, then maybe you can publish it at the end. All right, but most are going to be in there somewhere. And the reason for saying, as soon as you have some ideas, let's see what other people have written, is because that will help you in terms of giving focus to those research questions. And it will also help you in terms of undertaking the research. So how do I do it? Well, let's look at how other people have done it. I think it's a pretty good idea. So in terms of the proposal, idea would be, what is it you want to do? And why do you want to do it? So that would be the notion of the introduction. And then, well, what have other people done in this area? Once you've looked at what other people have done in this area, then hopefully you can say, well, I'm going to build on, or I'm going to use what they've done in the context of my dissertation. So that becomes then the proposed method. Now, I think what you're doing at this stage is looking for a few kind of key articles, rather than, lots and lots. The lots and lots will come later when you get to your dissertation, but try and focus on a few key articles, see how they've done it, and see if you can do something similar. Now, something similar might be someone's done a study for the US. Right, I'm going to do a study for a different country. It might be that they've done a study of this industry and you're going to do a study of this industry. It might be that they did a study 20 years ago and you're saying, I want to see if things are still the same now. So various different ways in which you can use that literature. But that's a very good starting point to see, how would I approach this? Given my general idea, how would I approach it? Is it approachable? So here's my idea. I identify a bit of previous research. I have a look through and think, I don't understand a word of that. Okay, maybe I should think about it again. So as I say, very important, it strikes me. Sorry? Yeah, the acoustics in these things are really bad, aren't they? I'll try and speak a bit louder, sorry. Okay? So first step, the proposal, so that we can get an indication of whether we think this represents a dissertation topic, and also whether we think it is doable within the timescale. Then the second thing we have is that big document, the dissertation, the one that probably, for a number of you, and probably for me if I had to go through this again, seems quite daunting. So, 15,000 words. But one of the things that's going to incorporate, which you would have started already, is this notion of a literature review. So a few key articles in terms of the proposal, but now what you're looking for is a much broader, much more rounded view of what has been undertaken already in this particular area. And then what typically you'd have, so typical structure, is an indication of the approach you plan to take, what people grandly call methodology, and then, your analysis or your discussion of what you found out from undertaking this particular research. So from using this particular methodology. Now, as I've said already, and it says there, a typical structure. A typical structure, no matter whether you plan to use some sort of qualitative approach or whether you plan to use some sort of quantitative approach. But as far as your individual project is concerned, if you think a different structure would work better, then use it. But again, what I'd suggest is, bounce those ideas off a tutor. So don't just go off on your own and do it. Work through with the tutor whether they think that that structure would work better. Was that another question? Yes?
How do you determine what the best structure is used, whether you take a qualitative or quantitative approach, or what method would be best for your research?
Okay. I'd say that's the same point I've made already. Look at the literature. All right, I've got a bit more somewhere about the literature. But that's the way in which you usually get a handle, not only on what approach to use, but also how to structure your material.
But if the literature that already exists is different from the start that you are taking.
So I've got that thing in my ear. Speak up a little bit, please.